Hey everyone, so today we're going to be talking about how as a driver we find the edge of grip in the car. How do you feel it and how do you know that you're about to get to the edge without going way beyond it? It's quite honestly one of the toughest things to do as a driver, and it's one of those questions I get asked so much because we all want to find that limit, but we're all nervous of going just too far over the limit and crashing. The repercussions of that are obviously quite high, so to be able to just go over the limit enough to feel it is quite important, but quite difficult to do. So today we're going to be having more of a discussion format rather than showing a lot of video or data because it's hard to show that and it's easier to talk about it. So in our series of how to learn a track, we broke down the 3 sections of every corner. And the best way to really start to test the limit of grip, especially laterally, so on load, not really under braking, is going to be in that section 3, that apex to exit. And the reason why I say that is because the mistakes are often a lot less costly. Typically, the big mistakes come on the entry of the corner, braking too late or rolling too much speed into the corner. When you're starting to accelerate out, often you have smaller corrections and can kind of play with that grip a little bit more than when on entry. So often when I'm trying to teach new drivers to learn the edge of the grip, we actually want you to make mistakes. But we want to limit any negative effects from those mistakes. As a driver, you're never going to feel the grip of the car until you go over it. And then as you develop more and more of the ability to feel that level of grip, that's when you're going to be able to really drive at the limit. So one of the big steps here is every lap we're going to bring in just a little bit more and more speed. Now, as we get closer to the limit, the amount of additional speed we're going to bring in needs to be less. That's quite key. I don't want you to bring in 5 miles an hour more every single lap because now we're going to really overshoot the grip once we get there. But as we get closer and closer, and I know you're asking, well, how am I going to feel if I'm closer and closer? You will start to understand what the car is telling you. You'll start to slide it more. And as you feel less and less comfortable, that's where we want to just make smaller increments up. We also want to be smoother with our inputs. That's really key. As we bring in more speed, being smoother not to shock the weight of the car. In fact, as a driver, I still sometimes bring in too much speed and make too rough of inputs. In fact, here's one mistake I made at Watkins Glen. You can see it caused me to have a pretty wild save. So what did I do wrong there? Well, it was one of my first laps finally of clear traffic, and as a pro, you're really trying to go and practice at a lap time. And I rolled first too much additional speed over what I had done previously, and my initial turn-in and my throttle application were just too aggressive. So I was at the load of the car, I was too aggressive to throttle, it shocked the car and when it sent it over and out of its grip range. One thing as drivers we always have to think about is being smooth with our inputs to allow the weight to transfer for the car to find that platform, and that's where it generates a lot of grip. But as a driver, we have to have the confidence that when we make the mistake like that, we can save it. So one thing we want to talk about is how do we get confidence and how do we really get to the point where we can do that as drivers. One of the first things I would talk about is to gain car control is going to skid pad events. I don't know if any of you guys have ever done that. Not only is it a great place to build skills of finding the limit of the car and how to control the limit of the car, but it's also a lot of fun. Now, I don't want you sliding the car a lot on a racetrack because that's not the fast way to go, but it gives you the confidence as a driver that you can deal with it at the limits. I often hear drivers talk about how they don't have confidence in the car to attack the limits. But it's actually the confidence in themselves that they can control the car at the limit. Now, the second way I try to teach this on track is a little bit tricky, and it's sometimes somewhat controversial. But I would talk about if we want to learn the limit of the brakes, limit of the lateral load in the car, acceleration, we do that on very specific corners. So one of the great places to learn about edge of grip and straight line braking is actually at turn 7 at Sebring. If you look past the turn-in mark, there is a lot of road. Just open your hands and go straight. So I think it's a fantastic place to challenge your brake zone. What I tell a driver to do is brake at your normal point, and then go a meter later, a half meter later, a third of a meter later. What I want you to get to is first, the initial brake zone. Get to the point where you're locking those front tires, or if you have ABS, getting into that ABS. And then we know, okay, well, that's the limit of the initial brake zone. So how deep can we go and still combine the segment 2 and segment 3 of the corner? And the great thing about that is, if you make any mistakes in the brake zone, you can always open your hands, let off the brakes a little bit, and go straight, and you have tons of room, and there's not going to be any big downside to it. Now, there's certain corners you can't do that on. That's where you've got walls or the repercussions are too big. So the way I teach working up to a limit in practice is by picking the right corners to do that and at the right tracks, so that your mistakes aren't going to result in damaging the car. In fact, they just learn the limit of the car and learn the feel of the car. Now, I don't want my drivers doing that every lap. What I wanted to do is teach that slowly, working up to the limits, go over the limits, and then bring it back to where you were at the edge of the limit. And then the more time you can spend there, the more you'll be able to get on track right away and feel that and know where you need to be. And that's going to be a key to your success and actually keeping the car safe on track. So comment below, let us know if you guys have had any success with this method. This is really just going to be part 1 of our series here on learning tracks and finding the edge of grip. It's continual work. Even at the professional level, drivers are looking on how to get that. So this is a great way to learn the edge of grip on initial braking. Also on the part 3 of the corner from apex to exit, we will dig into finding the edge of grip on corner entry next week.